Today, we're going to check out the build process of this wishbone. All the parts and materials come from a kit from Tim McAmis, a lot of notching and a lot of welding to do, so let's check it out. Welcome to the Kiefer's Hot Rod Shop YouTube channel. I'm Nick Kiefer. Alright, before we get into the build, I want to thank y'all for watching and liking and subscribing. Really stoked to be up over 500 subscribers, and I hope you help me meet my goal of 1 million subscribers by the end of the year. Well, maybe not 1 million yet, but 1,000 would be awesome. Anyway, hope y'all enjoy this. It's going to be a really cool build. So let's go ahead and start into the process. Alright, so I've got laid out here all the parts for building a Tim McAmis Wishbone. They included all this Chromoly tubing. It's real thin, lightweight stuff. Pretty nice, nice quality, clean-looking tubing. My favorite part of the design is the use of these slider bearings. The slider part of the wishbone actually rides in them, and they press into the center tube of the 1-point side of the wishbone, as seen here. And the actual slider slides in really nicely. Kit comes with these nice FK USA rod ends, and the mounting kit comes with a bracket system for this end, and which is on the axle. Typically, I actually ended up making my own, just a little bit different, but this end with the 2 rod ends will be mounted using brackets like this included in the kit. Nice, super high grade NAS or AN bolts and nylock nuts and washers, and a pair of spiral locks to hold these bearings into the center tube there, along with a roll pin to secure the heim joint from vibrating loose in that slider. So good looking stuff, and all that's left to do is to cut, clean, and weld everything and make a wishbone. So I made this jig using a piece of 2x2 square and 2x4 rectangle tubing. Welded it basically into a T, and then I welded these bolts on 1/2 inch on this side and a 5/8 here. Considering the dimensions I need to build this wishbone, I've kind of got these main tubes laid out here, basically where they'll end up going, just to kind of show how everything's going to fit. I've done some math to figure out how long the tubes need to be, considering the outside edge from the threaded adapter to where the notch will end for this center tube here. I think I'm going to go ahead and just kind of follow Tim McAmis's design here, since those are the materials I have that were supplied in the kit, with this X and kind of crossbar here. But that'll be the next step, is notching these up. So we'll go over to the notcher and check that out next. Alright, cool. I've got both pieces fit up. Kind of took you through the process of making one of them there. But I've got everything shimmed up in this jig using some 1/2-inch aluminum and little pieces of 1/4-inch plate I had sitting around. And it's all nice and level. I got it all fit up, and it's looking good and symmetrical. Went ahead and ground the very tip of this back so that when I go to weld it, I'm welding the thickest available metal to this center tube instead of just the very tip of this. I want to make sure I get into the strength of that tubing there. So I've cleaned these two main legs, and now what I'm going to do at this juncture is go ahead and tack these threaded adapters in place. Since the adjustment is going out at an angle, any length adjustment will also adjust the width. So these rod ends and tube adapters and everything really from this point forward are going to work kind of as a set, side to side respectively, just because any variance will both vary the length and the width that they are set at. So in order for them to properly bolt in the chassis, they have to remain constant. I've cleaned these tubes inside and out, and I'm going to go ahead and just tack these in a couple spots each side, leaving these loose from the center shaft or center tube here. Then I'll pull everything apart and complete these welds, and then set everything back up and start to weld all this together after I clean this centerpiece. Alright, so I've gone ahead and tacked the tube threaded adapters on the ends, and now I'm going to pull these tubes off of here and go ahead and weld all the way around those on each one, just to go ahead and secure those before I weld them in here. That way I can roll them and weld around the perimeter. A little easier than having to keep repositioning this whole thing to weld around them. So I'm going to do that and then start to set everything back up in the jig. Alright, I'm all set up to weld the perimeter of this tube adapter. And I've got one side tacked kind of in 3 places, so I'm going to start on the opposite side, just because that's secured in place and pulled tight. And this side I want to do the same, starting with this weld. But this tubing is I think it's 58 thousandths of an inch thick, pretty thin stuff. So I've gone ahead and switched to a 3/32 tungsten from a 1/8 that I use for a lot of the thicker stuff for this lower amperage weld. And I'm just going to go ahead and start going around this thing. I still, just based on these tacks, I've adjusted the amperage. I've got it on 124 amps right now, but I might move up or down once I start this weld, just based on kind of how it goes. Kind of tricky because the threaded adapter is pretty thick, and then this tubing's pretty thin, so it's kind of a tricky weld. Typically on this stuff, you want to focus your heat into the bigger piece of metal, and then just kind of catch the smaller piece. So I'm gonna start on this and kind of see how it's going, and I might adjust from there. But I'm gonna go ahead and start with this. Yeah, that looks like it's kind of flowing pretty nicely, so as long as I keep that going, I think that'll be pretty good. It might change once the parts get hot, but I like that so far. Alright, cool. So, yeah, you can see that started to turn all blue and purple, so it was getting pretty hot, but that weld seems pretty good. It's, yeah, definitely got pretty hot, but it's domed over and everything, so it's looking pretty good. I think I'm just going to keep it at this amperage and just, you know, work the pedal kind of like I did on this, and weld the other one. Make sure that's nice and clean. Alright, looks like it got just about as hot as the other one. Such a tricky little small weld. I might go over both of these once they cool and just kind of make sure they're all nice and in line here. But it looks like everything's nice and tied in together, so definitely time to let this thing cool down a little bit, and we'll work on it some more after it cools. Alright, cool. So some of those welds were a little off center. It was a little challenging to keep them right in the middle because I was welding off a center a little bit just because of this tubing is so thin. I wanted to keep that weld right off center, and so I didn't keep it as straight as I could have. So what I'm wanting to do now is just go over it and get everything nice and even, not only for looks but just to keep everything consistent. So I'm going to kind of use both hands here and just try to guide a nice consistent pass over this without filler. So that's what I want to do at this point. I think what I'll also do is find my stop-start location and weld 180 degrees out from that. I see it there. Cool. Alright, let's do it. Actually, I want to set this up a little higher. Alright. Let me find that stop-start location again. Yeah, cool. Right here on the opposite end. Cool. Let's try this out. Alright, didn't quite go all the way around. I just wanted to check it out and see how that's looking. I can dig that. pretty consistent. So I'm going to try to make a mark where I started. See if I can see that when I come around. And actually, I'm going to let this cool and work on the other one, because this one's already gotten hot just from that. Alright, that's getting too hot for me to rest my palm on, so let's let this one cool too. Alright, let's cool down a bit. Let's see if I can run this one. Alright, cool. It's a little more consistent looking. See if I can finish this one up, and then that'll be it for these. Just got to start putting them all together next. Alright, cool. Alright, sweet. We'll let them cool, and next step will be to set them back up on that jig, and just need to clean that center tube up, and everything will be ready to start tacking together. Then I can start forming the little tubes, the X and cross brace. Alright, cool. Got everything all set back up in the jig, all the threaded stuff put together. I cleaned the center tube and made sure these are all nice and clean. Everything's settled in there. And I'm going to go ahead and tape this together just to hold it while I tack it. I'm going to go ahead, tack it up, and then I'll start on the X and cross bar and all that kind of stuff. It's looking good. I've got all my measurements kind of established, and it's ready to go. Got everything taped up, and now I'm just getting ready to tack it all together. Alright, cool. So I've got the wishbone flipped over in the jig, and I'm going to tack the other side, and flipping this is definitely going to set it up as symmetrical as I can get it. Just verifying that it fits either way is a good thing in itself. So also it gives me access to these welds. So I'm going to go ahead and put a couple more tacks on here. And I might actually go ahead and give it like 4 at this point. And then we'll flip it back over and add a couple more. And then at that point I'll probably move on to making the X and crossbar and all that. I've got this thing set at like 124 amps, again with the 3/32 tungsten, and it seems to be doing pretty well. I'm definitely having to, point the electrode at the centerpiece that's really thick. I think it's 156 thousandths wall in the middle. Otherwise, I just want to be careful not to get this too hot, take it in stages and run as many amps as I can without just melting through everything. Alright, cool. So I laid 4 tacks on this side in addition to the ones at the very tips and the 2 on the other side. I'm letting it cool for a second, and then I'm going to go ahead and flip it over and put a couple extra tacks on the other side, and then we'll move on to the X and cross brace. Got it set up back the other way in the jig, and now I'm just going to stick a couple more tacks on there and move on to the next steps. That's coming together. Time to cut some more tubes. Another thing is I want to get this all set up and tied together in the jig, of course, before I finish all of these welds. Just want everything tacked up so it's nice and stable and triangulated, and then I'll weld everything, and hopefully it'll stay as true as possible doing it in that manner. Alright, so I need to use this different tube notcher with a small arbor to notch this stuff with the smaller hole saws. It changes from a 5/8 to I think a 1/2 thread to engage the blade itself. Back over here, cut snake composite boats using this one, and I'm about to notch this piece. This will be the continuous piece that makes up the X, and after that I'll make the 2 pieces to complete the X, which will attach to this piece that goes all the way. So I'm going to cut this, and then I'll take it back to my shop and clean it up and fit it up, and we'll check that out. So I've just made the second notch on the main X cross piece here. I've got it taped to this piece of tube just so that I can eyeball the angle in the notcher here. But I'm going to take this back to my shop, clean it up, and fit it in there. Clean this all up, clean the notches up, and I even polished the outside of the tube. And also under these I've drilled gas expansion holes for when I go to weld this. Still a little final cleanup, but I've got this main part of the X here fitted up pretty nicely. Got the notches lined up pretty well, and everything cleaned up. Also, the way that this wishbone is situated in the jig is in its shortest position that is planned to be in the car, which means that this is driven in as far as it ever will be. And I've got clearance here, and I can also install and uninstall the bearing on this end, and that's actually something that Tim McAmis warns about in the instructions, and I believe he also goes over that in his video on this kit. But so everything is looking good. Typically I think I set this up so that it will be riding more or less an inch longer, maybe not quite an inch longer than this, just kind of ride height, normal suspension adjustment. And you know, obviously it has the freedom to compress a bit and lengthen as well. So everything's all situated in here, and next I'll be doing final cleanup on this, tack it in, and I've started to make the other tubes of the X that'll also be going in here. I just need to clean up this notch and get everything just right. I've got a couple extra pieces for that little piece as well. All right, cool. So I got this one notched, and I'm working on fitting it up. And I also notched one side of this while I was over there. and starting to fit it up, and just want to verify measurement and all that, and then go ahead and make that second notch, clean it all up and fit that. And then I also just have this little piece. At this point I've got the crossbar clamped up in the notcher here, with this piece taped to it just so I can set it up parallel, and I'm ready to make the second notch, and I'll take it back to my shop and clean it all up and do the final fit up on it. But about to make this notch now, and then we'll check that out in a sec. Got it notched, time to fit it up. Alright, I'm back with the crossbar from Cut Snake Composites, and fitting it up in here before I do the final cleanup, and it fits really nicely. Angles look right, notches look good, so I'm just going to give it a nice little cleanup on the side I just notched, and it should settle down in there really nicely. So after it's notched, it looks like this, just kind of rough, and you know, there's some little kind of features in there, and just for a good weld I want to make sure that's nice and true and clean. I've polished it up with the drum sander on the die grinder there, and before I deburr it and everything, I want to test this out, make sure it fits in here really nicely, and it does. It fits really well. So I'm going to take it over to the belt sander next and just kind of deburr all that on the outside surface there. Alright, so you can see I put a pretty good bevel on there with the belt sander here, and not only did I take that burr off, but also went ahead and made that bevel, and that's just going to help keep everything nice for weld penetration and welding and all that. Another thing I'll probably do is go ahead and grind these down a bit, just to make sure they're not really is blade shaped but more blunt, again just for a stronger weld. Alright, and so I've done that. I've gone ahead and just ground the surface on both ends a little bit, just so when I'm welding this, I'm welding into the meat of the tubing and not just a really thin protrusion. But this thing's looking really nice, and should be ready to go. So I've got the third tube of the X here, and I've got it set up in the drill press with this 3/4 inch hole saw, and this was too short to grab in that tube notcher, so I'm gonna have to try to do it like this. Hopefully it won't end in disaster, but we'll check this out and see how it fits up. Alright, I think I'd like to lower the RPM. Actually, I'm going to try it real slow, just see if it does it. Yeah, so this thing doesn't have that much throw. I'm right at the bottom. Alright, so I've pulled this mandrel out a little bit, and I'm just going to try to complete this hole. Great. Clean it up and see how it fits. Alright, so I cleaned this up a bit and actually ended up shortening it a little. And fits in there really sweet. So that completes the X. Just have to finish cleaning everything up and inside and out and drilling vent holes, but there's all the pieces, all the braces and stuff, so nothing to it but to clean it all up and weld it together. Got everything all cleaned up, and I've also drilled all the gas expansion holes. I've got one in the end of each X, and then one on either end of the cross tube. It'll go, you know, close to the rod ends there. I've been sanding and acetoning everything. Got it all shiny and clean, and just need to set it up and tack it all together, and then begin the process of welding it all. Alright, so I'm going to start tacking this thing together. I'm going to start with this main part of the X, and then fill it in from there. now that all this is tacked together, the next step is going to be for me to go ahead and methodically weld it all. I'm just going to be kind of moving around, keeping the heat to a minimum. I want to keep everything loaded in terms of internal stresses as it's welded, kind of in a mirror form. And periodically I'll flip it in the jig and weld the other side as well. So that's the next step, and we're gonna set you up on the tripod and check that out. This part I'm just doing one bead at a time just to keep it cool. The stuff's super thin, and I don't want to go too crazy on the heat here. As a whole, it's starting to get pretty hot. You can see, heat signatures starting to appear and all. So I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and let this cool. I might weld just a little bit here just in a sec, and then this is another spot that I can probably start working on now. I'll just move this clamp a little bit, but otherwise this stuff's all getting pretty hot, so I'll give it a while. Yeah, weld a little bit of this, see how it goes, and then give it a break. That's the beauty of using a gas lens. I'll probably be able to get away with this much stick out. That's a lot. But typically this does pretty well. If it starts to fizz, I'll draw it in a little bit and try to reposition. That super tight angle is really tricky too. I'm going to have to kind of work at that from both sides to get it totally joined. Going to draw this in just a touch. Should be cool. Before I flip it, I want to see if I can get more weld in that joint there. This is really tricky too because this tubing is very thin. I think 58 thousandths wall on these outer parts, so it's tricky. But once again, you know, you start to see things turn blue and it's getting hot. So I'm going to try to get some welds here. I'm going to I've got everything kind of smoothed out. One thing with this is I'm kind of noticing where the weld is taking a little bit of time to wet out, which typically means go ahead and turn the amperage up, because if you're taking a lot of time to initiate and complete that weld, you're just putting a ton of extra heat into the part. It's one of those kind of interesting things about TIG welding is typically you say more amps, more speed, more travel speed, colder weld. Not that it's a cold weld that didn't penetrate, but it's you're putting less heat overall into the thing. It's that time that really overheats something. I'm right on the edge of that, but I don't want to turn the amperage up because I like how it's doing all of this. If later I realize that I'm dwelling too long or anything like that, I will go ahead and step the amperage up a little bit. I'm at 124 amps also, so just to give you an idea of where I'm at with the 3/32 tungsten, 25, 26 cubic feet per hour of argon, just for folks curious about my setup here. But that's something you want to keep in mind, is just how much heat you're putting in, and that's not directly correlated with amperage. So I'm going to let this cool while it's all clamped and nutted in. Flip it over, weld the other side, then I'll come back to this side. All right, I've got this wishbone flipped over in the jig, and I'm going to start welding the other side here. It's going to kind of do the same thing as the other side, but just on the other side. Just trying to keep everything nice and symmetrical. I've noticed that the arc is kind of dancing around a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and just take a second to sharpen this tungsten up and continue on with welding. All right, we're back. Got the point really clean now, and sometimes that's just it makes a difference just with how the arc is directed from the metal to the electrode. So with these two welds that I've made here, I just wanted to give the welds that I'll be making on these joints kind of a landing point. I want to weld everything from here to here, just because as I weld the inside of this tube, it's going to want to bend it like this, which will make it where it is kind of stuck in the jig and makes it hard to flip for welding, and also just generally bends this tubing. So if I weld from this end to this end, it'll tend to kind of draw the tubing back, not really against that tendency to bend around a weld, but it'll tend to kind of resist that as much as possible. It's kind of an unavoidable thing, but that's just kind of what I do to keep that at bay as best I can. Alright, that's definitely a lot of heat. Let that cool and flip it over. Alright, I've got it flipped over in the jig. Back to the other side, and I'm going to work on bringing some of these welds around. Just going to kind of continue in the same order as I started, and try to complete some stuff. And if it starts getting hot, I'll give it a little bit of a break too. So here we go. Flipped back over. Looking good, just a little bit left to seal up, but I'm going to let this all cool down for a little while and come back and do that in a bit. Weld these two joints up, and it'll be pretty much welded other than just little touch-ups here and there, and this little piece I'll do later. Alright, looking good. Just got to go around and just make sure everything's all sealed up, and then later when I can pull this out, I'm going to complete the very front of that weld. But it's looking awesome. Alright, I've got the slider out, and I've got everything still clamped and bolted into the jig otherwise. But I'm just going to go ahead and complete these welds in this little spot here, like this. Alright, cool. Everything's sealed up, and I'm just going to go over it and touch little things up if I find an uneven spot or anything like that, but this thing's looking good. Got everything welded up, and I've let it cool in the jig here, so I'm getting ready to go ahead and pull it out, but everything turned out pretty nice. Went ahead and I clear coated this thing. It looks pretty cool on here. Kind of looks a little darker than before, but shiny. It's kind of neat. It's gonna be cool all put together with the rod ends and everything. Cool. Got it all cleared up. So let's check out the basic assembly of this thing. Let's check out the bearings. Here's what they look like, and there's actually a seam, which in my mind I'm thinking I want to avoid from putting left or right, because this piece it's getting forced left and right, not necessarily up and down. So I'm going to go ahead and push those in just like that. I'll put the seam on this one down compared to the other one up, or this one up with that one down. Alright, so in order to get this all the way in, I sized this before I welded everything, so it's just has the resistance of staying in place. If it was any tighter, I'd need to find some kind of a drift, or some kind of round item of that diameter. Like a good thing to use would be a socket, so go to the socket set and find one that fits perfectly. But in my case, I'm able just to push that right down in there. Alright, so next I need to install the spiral lock here. It's got the little lift out little tangs on either side, so I can't really put it in backwards, but just want to make sure I don't paint myself into a corner here. So I'm going to start by sticking one end in, and I'm just going to try to coax this thing into the groove in there. There we go. Making sure that it slides in nicely. I might have to drive the bearing bushing in just a little more. Alright, I'm going to have to push all this in just a little further, so this is where the socket will come in handy. Just give it a little tap, and there it goes. And on these, you can tell this is all the way in when it is able to clear the slider shaft. So it looks good. Just have to pop in the other one, and then this end of it will be completely assembled. All right, let's make sure the bearing's all the way in. This one's just a little trickier because of the proximity of the bracing, but not too bad. I left myself some pretty good room. There we go. Kind of feeling it get started. There it is. All right, cool. And just like the other side, you can make sure it's fully installed. If there's clearance with the slider bar, and it's going all the way through. It's really nice. Nice smooth action there. You know, not a lot of play. That's actually just the looseness of the heim joint. Tighten that up, that bolt, and it's in there nicely. So that's awesome. All that's left is to stick the heim joints in. All right, great. Now it's time to install the rod ends here. With the aid of my little reference mark I've made here, I'm able to coordinate which pieces belong together. So what I've actually done is I built the assembly intending to have the rod ends threaded out 2 full turns, just in case I need to shorten it or adjust it for whatever reason. I'm able to fine-tune that either way, in or out. So I know this one belongs here. And what I want to do is go ahead and, you know, loosen the nut all the way, and I'll get this close. And then go ahead, while the nut's loose from the threaded adapter, just go ahead and turn it out 2 full turns. And then that's ready to go after I tighten down that jam nut. So I'll stick the other one in here, do kind of the same thing. There we go. All right, cool. Stick this back in here. And that's it. Other than tightening all those jam nuts, and I'm gonna hold off on doing the roll pin through the heim joint on the slider for now. I'm going to set the drill press up later and try to get this really precise. I might even use, you know, a different piece of equipment to do this. I just want to make sure I get it just right. So that's going to be later, but this is a nice looking piece of suspension here. So that's cool. And next will be mounting it in the car along with some other rear suspension stuff, and that'll be looking really great. Well, this thing turned out great. I want to thank y'all for watching and liking and subscribing. I'm really stoked to get this mounted in the car. I'm looking forward to that, and hope y'all are too. That'll be coming soon. But once again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.